Yes, check out our new one, episode 3, dropping right now. The Highmark podcast with myself, Jesse Carstairs. We have Ty Flanagan and Alex Flanagan. What's
How's
up,
it going?
boys?
What up?
What up? How goes it?
So there's some controversy in the tech world. I want you to at least fill me in.
Yeah, it's very specific to the tech IT tech news. You know, tech news has been very helpful. Originally, it was basically like advertisements for a new tech product. So say there was a new phone coming out. When it first started, it was really just like pretty much companies were paying them to just say that their product was wonderful. So eventually people got so sick of that new channels emerged that were literally starting to rigorously test the devices and give really honest opinions. And yeah, they still take, ad money and they still take sponsorships and etc. But there was a big pushback because of how gamed the system was in terms of Samsung coming to them with money and just saying, make our product wonderful, that these companies, these new channels pushed back. And Linus Tech Tip was one of the very first that really set the standard for that. And so over time, his channels have absolutely exploded on YouTube. They're humongous. They're definitely some of the biggest brands in the field, I would say. Would you agree, Ty?
Yeah,
In terms of
absolutely.
that. And so one of the other people in the field that's highly respected, they all have different ranges. Like basically some are more apt to take payouts from the companies and some are extremely vigorous in their testing as well as their criticism of tech companies. And so Gamers Nexus is probably more on the highly critical, but probably loses out on a lot of sponsorships. And then Linus is gets more sponsorships and is less critical, but still, And so Gamers Nexus put out a big thing and saying they put out a big shocking video about what is wrong with Linus Tech Tips. And they proceeded to detail all these things that they had come across over the years of definitely inaccuracies in their testing. So, I give ranges in certain things when people are talking about stuff and it's inaccurate. It depends on the field. If you're just shooting the shit, like say on a podcast or in other things, that accuracy is important, but not nearly as important as if you're deciding whether to put down $2,000 on a piece of tech hardware, and if the testing is actually accurate to what you're watching on the video. So you do it. That stuff does add up. And so Gamers Nexus had some good points on, I think, that Linus Tech Tips was basically going too far, too fast. The company's exploding, turning into a corporation of 120 employees. And Linus Tech Tips had recently talked about, I think half a year ago, about somebody had approached him to buy the company for $100 million. So give or take, it has a valuation of $100 million. And so it's a big company now. And so Gamers Nexus called him out. And since then, it happened about a week ago. And since it's been a huge shitstorm in the whole community, obviously, because you have two of the biggest brands in the field. One called the other out. And at first, Linus just put a little Reddit post about certain things, and it caused such a huge backlash that he had to actually put out a full video confronting it and dealing with it. And they basically said that we are going to review our entire thing. We're going to bring a third party in to analyze our processes, and we're going to stop putting out all videos for at least a week until we can realign our testing and our things like that, which I think is a great approach. What just evolved just recently is now this girl who used to work there came out, and now she says there's some kind of Me Too thing of sexual allegations in the company. That's going to take time to sort out, but those kind of things I'm always suspect about, just because like that could have been she's long been not with the company, and for this to emerge just now during these crises, that always seems to happen a little too frequently for me. But of course, I'm going to get totally fried for saying that. So I'm just going to say that until the actual data comes out, we should probably be a little hesitant. Not to say that her things are wrong, but I'm just saying if it really was, I just wish that you would make those allegations public when you got fired or when you left the job.
Yeah, exactly.
Some years ago, then
allegations against, Alex?
The allegations are not against Linus directly, but people in his company, and they said she said things to the effect that other employees were grabbing her and saying things of her work was poor and that things of that nature. So that has added another spark to the. It was starting to die down, and now it added another spark to the whole thing. Of course, with the Scrolls allegations. So Linus also addressed that. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
From what I understand, that all stems from like the workforce of Linus and all of them, how they're just trying to pump out as many videos as possible, right? So
that was probably like one of the criticisms that Gamer Nexus dealt in. The water block situation is a really mess, and that's a big part of it that people are so upset about. Is basically they like a small new company. Say we just started, the three of us, a small company, and we were making cooling blocks for GPUs. We sent them our test prototype. They made a video about our test prototype, but they used the wrong GPU and then said it was garbage.
Yeah, but totally botched the review, and then
they botched the review. Then they somehow it fell through the cracks. They didn't send the prototype back and auctioned it off.
Okay, so first of all, why would you send the prototype to another? I would not. I would make another prototype of the prototype and then send that. I don't understand. That's I don't know.
The auction, I definitely agree. That's a bad move, because essentially, if I was a competitor, then I would buy that auction. I would then have a prototype I could just break down, and I just stole your thing for free. Not for free, but I stole your thing for way cheap, and that's a problem. What isn't a problem is that you made your company was dependent on this prototype that you sent to a reviewer. That's also problematic as well.
That's also very problematic. But it is super messed up that Linus. So they just didn't return it at all, right?
Yes, they said they auctioned it off, and then the money actually went to charity. So the worst part about this is Linus didn't actually make any money on it. It just fell through the cracks that it was supposed to be returned to that small company, Billet.
Yeah.
And but as a result, their competitors could have got a prototype without very little effort, and Linus didn't even make money. So nobody won, and it just became a huge shitstorm. Just because someone didn't, check an email that came into Billet saying they needed to send it back. So it is a good criticism that they're moving way too far, too fast. And if you're a $100 million company, and you're putting out, like, how many videos they put out a day? Like 4 until recently. They put out like multiple videos a day on different channels. They're going way too far, way too fast, and they did a crash and burn pretty bad.
Yeah, Gamer Nexus had a good point where he was saying that the YouTube algorithm doesn't demand you put out a video a day or anything like that.
Right.
It helps.
They're doing it for monetization purposes. Yeah, they're just rolling in so much money by putting out so much per that. It was just, and so they do need to hit the brakes a little bit. Now they did put out a video. We can link them all too if that's helpful, so you can review what they said. Because Linus did have a response video with all the top employees of his company, each addressing each issue that was brought up. Now this video was put out before the new sexual allegation thing, so that doesn't. The criticism of this video now is that they didn't address that. But from what I understand, that actually came out on social media after. So again, it's one of those things that if this was an issue, that should have been addressed from when she was let go, not suddenly now. I do disagree with this kind of situations, because it does seem to be attention seeking or profit seeking at a moment of it just the timing is wrong. I'm not saying that it's not true. I'm not saying that at all. It could very well be true. 100%. Don't know. What I am saying is that just these kind of things, do you think would be planned better if it was super important and it needs to be addressed? Then you would address it as soon as you let go from the company. So overall,
we should be in a society where they should be comfortable to be able to bring forth those allegations immediately. We deal with them immediately.
For sure.
Each time. And it's hard for me to put myself in their shoes, and I understand, there's all sorts of emotions that come along with those situations that could probably deter you from doing that immediately. But it's like, for me, if it's that big of a situation, you need to go to the respected authorities to deal with it in the right manner.
Like with the Justin Rowland, if, let's say, oftentimes women say they don't because they don't want to be harassed or jeopardized. But since you're potentially putting someone's life in major issues by these allegations, then you need to also be brave enough, because they're about to go through a bunch of things. You should also be brave enough to get it out there and put it out there and deal with it. Because if you're right, then you're right. And you no matter what
Yeah.
anyone says online, shouldn't
Truth
matter
prevails.
towards whether
Yeah.
you're accurate or not.
Mhm.
I know that's not easy, but life isn't. So I don't know what to say about that. And also, if your allegations are false, then you're going to destroy somebody's career over falsehoods, and they have to go through that same process, but the opposite side of it, of
Right.
what the allegations the woman's going to face. So
Right.
these are those kind of things that, if it's really worth it and it's truly accurate, it should have been addressed from that moment. And of course, part of this too that makes this so fiery is there's a rabid fan base for Linus that's been built up over the years. He sells his own merch, and somebody's phone's going off. The merch sells great, because often they have repeat buyers that even just will buy. They make a new backpack and people just buy it. Now, what comes with usually when you have a fan base like that? Haters. So they also have, and for some years they've had people that just want to hate on Linus Tech Tips just because it's Linus Tech Tips. So both have lots of ammunition now for this current.
Yeah, he's wrapped up in a whole source of mess. It seems like a whole tornado of
For sure.
craziness.
But this is not going to make the Reuters or the New York Times or anything of that nature. This is very specific to the tech news industry and is not some overarching news article whatsoever.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that's filling you in on what's going on in the tech world.
That is interesting. So what else do we got today on the docket? Elon punching Zuck? Maybe not anymore.
Well, it seems to be that they're both calling each other out and saying that they're both too chicken to go actually fight. That's what it seems to be. Yeah, because Musk, he keeps just calling him a chicken, and Zuck keeps saying you are saying all these excuses. So it's a back and forth at this point.
Yeah, because I saw something that the UFC was not going to be involved. Italy offered the Coliseum, which is cool, and they were going to stream it exclusively on X and Threads or Facebook. But then I saw Elon said they don't have the capability to stream it live. So Zuck was pulling out, and I was like, that is funny.
Oh, like Threads doesn't have the capability to stream it live?
I think because Zuck was, I guess, pulling out, he was like, it must be because his company doesn't have the capability to stream it live.
See, and that's what it seems to be like. They're just going back with like jabs. Yeah. For like not real physical jabs, but you know.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, like this is what he's that's a parody. Never mind.
I was excited about it, and now I'm kind of over it unless it's actually going to happen. But with this he said, she said, everyone pulling out, it's like, all right, just get back to, improving the world.
I to be honest, I always thought it was very unlikely and far-fetched that it would be, first they have so many people depending on them that would file lawsuits to prevent an actual physical violence with each other, that even their shareholders and stuff would just be, and then also Commodus was one of the emperors who fought as a gladiator. He's he's famous for that. And, it was considered extremely weird and strange and dishonorable to do that, for an emperor to do that. So our richest people in the country fighting each other just has a very bread and circus aspect to it. That's just really weird. So I thought maybe they might still fight, but it's a reflection of our society if it's so bread and circus. But I honestly didn't think they were going to be honest.
So I do have a final recap for what is happening with this.
Yeah, fill us in.
So Elon Musk stated, I joked on X about fighting Zuck. Zuck then said, send me location. And then Italy offered the Coliseum. Then Zuck declined. Then I suggested his home as a safe space. Technically, he was traveling, or tragically, he was traveling. And then that seems to be the end of it. So and this is coming from Elon Musk on X.
Okay.
So it seems to be a joke from initially. Yeah.
And I
But
think
then
just so
he
many
was
people wanted to see it.
well, yeah, and then he was training with
He went
uh,
through the full training. Yeah.
GSP and Don Danaher, and like even Lex said he got to roll with Elon.
Yeah. So it was a big
Yeah,
publicity
John
stunt,
Danaher,
apparently.
not Dan.
Yeah. Which is kind of good, honestly. I don't know if our country could take a blow like that. Like, you know, we're already so, seen in the eyes of the world as a joke that I don't know if our billionaires duking it out in the Coliseum.
I don't think that helps anything really. And also, they had already talked about in financial like YouTube circles and stuff about potential lawsuits because Tesla's stock has been getting hammered lately, and they're talking about like the potential of what would happen. Just say something happened to Elon, it just maybe it's one thing if it was a car accident or a plane crash or something unpredictable, but a fight that then turned into something else. Now the probability that happened is so low, but people love to sue each other, so it would just in itself take on a life of its own.
So, Alex, the thing that how I look at it with the suing, he could just decide tomorrow he wants to be a fucking monk, and you can't sue him for that.
Right.
Him deciding to step away from Tesla, SpaceX, everything. I just want to go live in the hills and be a monk because I was inspired by some movie. And you can't sue him for stepping away from his company, just like you can't sue him for having a personal interest in something. Now, you can technically sue anybody for anything, but is there a reasonable cause, or did he do anything unlawful? No.
So
exactly my point. Yeah, I'm not saying these are valid lawsuits, but it would lawsuits would fly, especially if he said he was stepping down to be a monk, and then the Tesla stock price proceeded to go to 25% of its current price. Lawsuits are going to fly for years after, and they usually do because there's certain obligations and promises in terms of each quarter of the shareholders and stuff. So he would have to notify up to a certain amount of time, and if he didn't do X, Y, and Z, they'd have some bullshit lawsuit, and it would take a long time. Of course, most of them would get thrown out, of course, but it's just enough to entangle everybody into a bunch of money going everywhere that,
Yeah, you do take on a fiduciary duty.
Those kind of obligations.
Which is the best interest of your shareholders.
For sure, that kind of thing, yeah.
Yeah, but it would be...
He could be a monk tomorrow if he wanted to, and he has enough money to fight off the lawsuits and say, I'm going to live in the thing, so for sure.
You're saying in the sense like he could just be a fighter? You're saying he could be a monk?
So my point is, any judge who is just going based off the law, if he decided to fight Zuck, there wouldn't be a reasonable thing about... It would be hard pressed to find a way that these people would win their lawsuit.
Right, yeah.
And saying that he decided to take up this hobby, and he's not doing it for money. So it's not like he's changing his profession.
Mm-hmm.
It's merely an exhibition to raise money. So he's participating in a charity event because they both said all the money would go to charity.
Right.
Because they each have their own charity that they were going to donate to at one point. So it's not like he's changing his profession, because if he instantly decided to go, I'm going to be a professional fighter, and leave there is some fiduciary duty, you could say, because he's taking up a different income career path. Suddenly.
I'm sure there's stock obligations that he may have to maintain for a certain amount of quarters or something. It's all super, but once he met those obligations, then he's free to go do his thing. But if he said, I'm going to leave tomorrow, I'm going to leave everything hanging, screw you guys, then lawsuits will go flying.
Yeah, because he might even have an employment contract with them to ensure that he's going to fulfill X, Y, and Z.
Stuff like that, and woo! That would be wild.
If he's doing the fight as merely a hobby, there's nothing that goes against an employment contract about hobbies and charity.
Hasn't he been hit for just smoking weed on a podcast before? I can't
Oh,
imagine
for sure.
that.
They try to go after them.
He would get hit with so much stuff.
That's a great example. Like the lawsuits
but that was
frivolous.
federally illegal.
Right.
That was illegal on a federal basis, though, at the time,
That's a good point. Yeah.
But it's often his shareholders who are the ones pulling those lawsuits in an attempt to make sure that he's not making the stock tank. Because if the stock tanks, that's when a lot of these people with money can put lawsuits to try to claw their money back. And that's what they'll do. And they'll fight it. They'll fight it hard for sure for years.
Yeah. And then they'll just buy more because his stock did drop right after that podcast and people were threatening lawsuits. And then their fucking stock went sky fucking high. Like literally 2 weeks later.
I think that's where his hubris comes from in this case, where he's just like, I don't even care, man. After it might tank for a little bit, I'm going to come back even stronger in that sense. So
anyone who bets, Peter Thiel talks about how you should never bet against Elon, regardless of what it is. Peter Thiel was with him in the acquisition of PayPal, and then they worked together on PayPal, and they're still friends to this day from what I hear. And it's just you don't bet against Elon. So regardless if he's smoking weed or fighting someone, you're going to see a little dead cat bounce, and then it's going to the moon.
Despite everyone, his results are amazing.
Yeah, to me, those are indications that he's actually like a human. You know what I mean? Like he's like a real human that like does stuff. And
today's CEOs are so penned into a procedure that they have to give off this thing that they're basically like fake plastic to this point, where they're even like, for example, like you guys were saying with the Biden postings, they're so cornered and manicured that even other people do their posts for them, and CEOs do the same thing. It's not just the politicians. Most of the CEOs don't post any of their own stuff. I think actually Elon even said that. There was a post about people saying like more CEOs should just say their thoughts on X instead of the curated, perfectly manicured, shareholder-friendly outputs that they're putting, because then they just become fake plastic. And the fact that he's a human and will go on a podcast and smoke a blunt is pretty wild. If you look at the CEOs that are afraid to even get out of their houses because of some controversy, they won't even, they live as a very manicured life. So at least in public facing. Yeah.
It definitely humanizes them. And one of the things I used to think Zuck was like a,
lizard?
I don't know. A freaking lizard man who, only just wanted to use all of us pawns to take over the world. But then you see him out just like surfing in Hawaii,
he's a weird
doing jiu-jitsu,
and
then he's up in Lake Tahoe just like wakeboarding. And it's like, fuck yeah, dude. Just be a human. That's awesome.
Yeah,
for sure.
You just got to love those things.
That's what most of us want to see of these high-flying super peoples who we assume they are, but they're definitely not. They just had great opportunities and ran with them. There's nothing. Elon's exceptional in that he's taken on multiple different fields, and I think we can all say at this point, it's not luck with this guy. He has a work ethic and a ability to see the problem and attack the problem. And so everyone's been hating on him for years, but it doesn't stick because and I would say he would have already been buried by that blunt incident if he didn't constantly make results. He's constantly producing results. That's what. So other CEOs have been destroyed by stuff like that, but because they weren't turning over Tesla constantly, even in a down market, turning over good profit margins. That's crazy. That's crazy in a car company. So stuff like that is what makes him unique, I would say, and why he can smoke a blunt without the repercussions that other CEOs would be
smoking a blunt.
One of my favorite Elon stories is when he was trying to find a head engineer for SpaceX for their rocket, and he said all the top guys were told not to work with him, and he didn't want any of just the good guys, so he said, I decided I would just make it me. And it's
that's the other case. He's actually truly brilliant and engineer-minded. He often touts that he taught himself the basics of rocket science so that he could properly manage the SpaceX propulsion systems. That's some shit that's like definitely, I would say most CEOs probably can't do that. They might be very specialized in a field. They might have a master's in finance or something and are super good with numbers. But to be able to be a coder who then taught himself rocket science and then actually makes SpaceX have rockets that can land because of what he developed. And like I said, often he's working with great engineers, but you have to know the questions that the engineers are asking to make the right monetary decisions on how to proceed. That's where he seems to be pretty awesome.
And have you guys heard his story about why his rockets are pointy?
Because of that movie.
He did it just because of the movie to be funny.
The dictator.
The dictator. No, more pointy. Yeah. And it's like, well, they're not. Is it aerodynamic? No, pointy. He made them like that specifically because of that movie, and he thought it was funny.
Exactly. And if it works, it works. That's exactly those kind of things that.
And it's like.
Perfect example. CEOs would get hammered, fired, and then sued if they made that, and then the company failed. But since not only the company flew high and then is now the largest private contractor with NASA, etc., you can make it as pointy as you want. I don't give a shit. People can hate all day, but if the results, again, it's all about the results. Actually, is my whole thing.
And he does. He drives results. And I told you guys, we always talk about SpaceX being that company that's going to take us to Mars. But before that, they are going to be the world's greatest transportation company ever, because you're going to be able to get to Japan or Sydney, Australia, and have fucking dinner in the same day. Hey, honey, let's go to Sydney, Australia or Japan and have dinner tonight. And we're going to be able to fly there. We're going to have cargo, instead of cargo ships, we're just going to have something sent across the fucking United States in 4 hours. You want to fucking drop ship that? Yeah, it's going to be flown across the world in 4 hours because
the automation costs. I always think back to the Concorde. Have you guys seen that plane before? And a lot of people considered that. I mean, it was a supersonic plane. It was the first of its kind, where it was a supersonic airliner. And people were like, "This is the future. This is amazing for how quick you can get from one end to the Atlantic to the other." But there were so many logistical and hardware problems with it that it was never profitable and sank under its own weight, essentially. So they don't fly that anymore. There is no supersonic airliner like that. He's literally going to bring that back in a different way, and I'd be totally fine with going on a Dragon 9, and I'd take a Dragon 9 over to Tokyo, and it took me, instead of the frickin' 13 hours or whatever the hell it is on a current, it'll take like an hour and a half or something, or 2 hours. I'd be like, boom, no problem.
Do you think civilians can handle the G-force that's required to be able to
Yeah, especially if. To be fair, probably are not going to be able to. But it's one of those. It's always going to be a niche thing. But frankly, anything like that is not everyone. Not everyone's going to pay for supersonic flight anyway.
Well, kind of thing. It would be good for cargo. And I was thinking, think about how rapidly globalization has increased with just commercial jets and cargo boats. It's like, think about globalization rapidly spreading. If you could send that amount of cargo across the planet in that short amount of time, dude.
In that amount of time, it would only grow, commerce, especially for vital components. Like, say there's quantum computers that need vital components sent rapidly.
Damn.
That's exactly the kind of things within reason that he could send super fast. They pay a premium for it, but he'll get it there faster than any other current transport that there is. I would say that's the ways off, though. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and when those costs start really coming down, it's like, okay, what is the cost comparison of taking SpaceX from, we'll just say, China warehouse to the port of San Francisco, where it's just a couple hours, versus putting it on a boat, that fuel and time, how long that's going to take to then get to the same port. Where is it that time price correlation is it's just worth going through SpaceX?
For sure.
They'll eventually, those things will cross.
Mm-hmm.
And it will be a niche thing, but I can think of, say, if I'm going for my life trip to Tokyo, I would pay a premium to take it that way.
And initially it will be a premium.
That'd be cool.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Initially it will, and then it'll, over time, it'll be fucking Southwest goes out of business because they just can't compete.
If they can scale it to that level, but Ty makes a good point that the G forces of the actual rocket is going to probably deter like because for example, I was flying on a flight with this chick and it was not turbulent at all. And she was sitting next to me and I was like, why are you throwing up so much? And why are you so sick? I was trying, I was being nice to her. Of course, I was patting on the back even and everything. And I got her back, but I was just like, your brain is way over, whatever the situation. And she obviously had some kind of flight phobia or whatever. Those people are never going to take a Tesla or a SpaceX because that's like the G forces is 10 times the lift off of a,
That's like a roller coaster times 1,000 or times 100.
It is intense when you're first getting at the lowest level, but there's people like me who would literally save money and pay a premium to go on that instead
would be awesome.
A Delta flight. Awesome. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there's just as many. There's tons of us who would pay a premium just to do that instead. So
that'd be badass.
There's going to be once they could scale it up and make enough of them. The cool thing about the Starship, what's game changing, is that the amount of tonnage that it's going to be able to take into the sky is unlike anything. Even the Atlas V, the moon rockets, the ones that went to the Apollo mission rockets, those were the heaviest heavy lift rockets we've had until now. Even much more than the Challenger, you know what I'm saying? The space shuttles, even more than the space shuttles. So the heaviest ones before that was the Atlas V's. Those are massive, insane rockets. This, Elon's new one's going to shatter that for sure. And the whole key now, though, to make it financially work, though, is that baby's got to take off and land without detonating on the landing pad. So we'll see how that goes.
So I was just looking up to kind of transition it to another billionaire. Do you guys know much about the Blue Origin update with Bezos?
I don't know the new update. I followed it recently. Virgin Galactic, I originally invested in them, and I immediately, within about a week, I pulled all my money out because I was like, this is ridiculous. It doesn't make
Galactic
sense. Virgin Galactic is now dead. Yep, de facto. So Virgin Galactic failed.
Blue Origin? Or was
Blue Origin is the other attempt. And if Blue Origin really doesn't start announcing some big changes and projects, I feel they're heading the same way more towards Virgin Galactic than towards SpaceX.
So Virgin Galactic was the commercial space line for people?
Yeah, Virgin Galactic. And it was started by the same dude who did the Virgin Airlines.
Richard Branson.
Richard Branson.
Okay.
He was the major funder, but he wasn't that's what separates Elon. Richard Branson, to start his company, he didn't learn rocket science. You see what I'm saying? That's like the difference. He was an investor, but he didn't learn rocket science to then know exactly how to get these things profitable.
Right.
And so as a result, he was a major investor, but I remember it had a couple good ideas, but one of their things detonated, killed 2 pilots. And they did do their famous little flight where they were up in the air. Plus, the whole thing was that you would be actually in 0G for 50 seconds or something like that. It was so short. I was like, that's super dumb. So Richard Branson and a couple of his friends took a test flight in the Virgin Galactic. And this is about as far as it's ever gone, as they took a flight into 0G along the surface of the Earth. And felt weightlessness for just a few minutes or seconds and then fell back to Earth. That was the whole thing. So the tourism thing of the plan was to have people pay a lot of money to do that. And that's
sadly
rough.
There would be people that would pay that, but it wouldn't be enough to sustain that company.
There would be.
Yeah.
But if I'm going to pay, $10 million or something, then I want a little bit more than that. And SpaceX is going to do. SpaceX literally did that for I think $30 million and allowed a few people to go up to the space station. That's more my ticket, and I think a lot of more people on space stuff ticket. But I think there was never an audience for people who want to be weightless for 2 minutes and pay.
Well, yeah, because there are weightless simulators you can go to for a fraction of the price.
There you go. Yeah. You want that? I'll get you a nice screen and a simulator.
Yeah.
So it went tits up, and the stock price collapsed into the floor of the Virgin Galactic, and then it collapsed. And now another company bought up some of the assets of it. I think it's going to get re-put together into a new thing, but It's in its original state. It's dead, and I'm so glad I pulled all my investment because that was a dumb thing.
Yeah, probably good call. Yeah, interesting. So
What's up with
then,
Blue Origin?
yeah, it looks like Blue Origin. The latest news from them. It looks like they were awarded a NASA partnership to turn lunar regolith into solar power systems on the moon. So it looks
I
like
super struggle with that. In that, what have they already demonstrated they can do?
right. That's a good question in the sense that you haven't seen like proof of what is it? Proof of concept or proof of for
Yeah,
like
proof of
what Elon
concept.
is.
Yeah,
Proof
exactly.
of-
Like
yeah.
Elon has
demonstratable.
proven,
Yeah.
yeah. Elon has proven proof of concept in this sense, but I haven't seen many launches to where Blue Origin has shown actual proof. But then again, I haven't.
And the reason why Elon generates the haters, in my opinion, is exactly like the Boeing Starliner situation. Have you guys heard about that?
I'm not
So
sure.
No.
the Dragon capsule, which is going to be NASA contracted both Boeing and SpaceX to make a transport module to take things up, both people and stuff, up to the International Space Station.
I see.
That's
cool.
Starliner has yet to still pass its testing. Not only has SpaceX already passed its testing, but has already taken up multiple people back and forth and multiple demonstrations. It's already passed its testing phase and is literally already in its contract phase with NASA. And Boeing Starliner still has not even passed its certification stage yet. Years after, they were supposed to be at the same time.
Yeah, it looks like March 2024 is when it's planned to actually launch.
Yeah. And that's just their first flight that they were supposed to do. They were supposed to be certified in December 2019. SpaceX is already, it was a little bit behind that, but it's already passed its tests and is already demonstrating and is serving contracts. These are those things where you're just like, damn, hate on the dude if you want, but.
And it's like, I try not to pigeonhole myself into like a Elon Musk fanboy, but it's really,
yeah, exactly.
It's really hard
to do,
not to. Yeah. And I get why people are so, I mean, I actually don't really understand why people are so upset with him, to be honest. It's kind of
there's something frustrating about when you have the zipped up JP Morgan CEO, and this guy's over here smoking blunts, but actually getting more results than these cookie cutter CEOs.
The
Boeing, Jamie Dimon?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's actually a bad example because Jamie Dimon's actually he's pretty good. He's demonstrated pretty good value for that company, but there's just so many that copy like him and are not giving results at him, and they just do the CEO outlook and look the part, but they're not delivering results anywhere even near towards the blunt smoking CEO is.
Yeah.
What happened? Now that we're speaking about companies that are trying to be like Elon, what happened to that Nikola Motors?
I think they're barely hanging on. Like they were able to weather that insane controversy in there. Are they still hanging on, or did they finally throw in the towel? Yeah, it looks like Nikola's stock is still there, but it's from its highs of insanity, it's now down to $1.87. Typically, if your stock is worth $5 or less, they call it a penny stock. So there you go.
I remember them. I remember that CEO talking so much shit because they were coming out with their own semi. They were coming out with a car. And there was just too much that just smelled like big investors were. I think even what's her name, Kathy Wood, even was saying, their promises are just way too big to be delivering in such short amount of time. And then they kept pushing back. So I haven't heard anything about them. Like, what was their stock at an all-time high?
All-time high was $65. It's now at $1.87. So if you would have invested money in June 19, 2020, you would have been pretty much 90% loss. You would have been completely wiped out. And the big thing that happened that killed it was he did talk some shit to Elon because it was like all new electric car makers. We're like best. So he was talking some shit. And then he did this demonstration about his semi. And when they people called out to the semi, there's no way that it could have been powered under its own powertrain. And turns out it was completely staged. And ever since then, they've never been able to recover from that. Even if they are making good powertrains now, no one is like believing them. So it was a PR absolute disaster, and especially he tried to get himself on the map because he was talking shit about Elon and all the other people. So. Whoops.
Yeah, it looks like so they just focus purely in semi trucks. It looks like.
Yeah, exactly. And Tesla has their own, right? Yeah. And you've seen those. And I think there's a general consensus that those aren't powered by some trick, or they are powered under their own powertrain. So I think.
You see those guys are driving. You'll see them on I-80.
Dude, I heard that Reno's the main test. Isn't that where they're actually testing them? So you guys actually get to be where they're doing the main testing for the semis.
Bro, not you see them. You see them all over here. I saw me and Chance in the course of a week just saw 3.
You see Tesla semis?
Yeah, they're out there, bro.
What? Already working. So we can say pretty definitively somebody's not actually, people aren't actually in a video pushing them behind or whatever that thing.
Yeah, no bullshit. We saw 3.
Wow. Dude, if they can get the mileage down on those, that'll be a pretty big game changer. I mean, obviously we're going to have to increase the power strain on our network for being able to handle all that, but
for sure.
That's a whole other conversation.
But like we talked about last episode, podcast 2, go back and review if you want to hear what we were talking about there. But just our infrastructure, having to upgrade that.
Yeah. Well, that's going to take a whole kind of pivot into different energy sources, I believe. If we're going to completely rely on our electric network to handle all this, then yeah, we're going to need some completely different methods.
And for a good comparison, based on the AI generated responses, is a semi-truck's diesel can travel an average of about 300 to 400 miles per tank. The Tesla does also 300 to 500 miles per charge. So the range is actually similar. I think there might be in terms of the weight capacity and things like that. But I think also it's in this stuff I don't know too much about, but often the actual torque of electric is significant. So it's the problem of how much energy is lost, the more torque you apply. So it doesn't last. So basically, it can't pull as long as a diesel, a heavy weight, but it can pull easily as much as any diesel. It just can't do it for as long yet because the actual torque. But diesels are optimum for that, and that's why we're going to need diesels for a long time. Because actually, diesels are better than even gas-powered cars in terms of actual torque and towing something. That's why all the cars are like that. Every big trucks are usually that do commercial towing is diesel because it has a special niche that it does well.
That's why when you get some of these people who are, we'll just say, climate change zealots who want to get rid of all fossil fuels, it's like you try that and see what happens with your grocery store.
Right, for sure.
Because how are we transporting just basic food if you just want a cold turkey cut out fossil fuel?
And literally, Tesla's the only semi that is all electric that can compete with them yet. And they can only make, we'll say, 10 of them a month or something. The hundreds of thousands of semi trucks, how are you going to go cold turkey? Because they literally can't make you enough. You're just going to go without trucks at the end of the day, unless Tesla can miraculously scale to hundreds of thousands of production, which is not going to happen. Those kind of reality things. We're going to need gas for a long time, but my whole thing about the electric thing is instead of having each individual vehicle pollute, the power plants are still going to be polluting, but they have many layers of filters and ways to reduce the amount of gases and that are poor coming out of it. Then instead of each individual car being its own power production and therefore highly polluting. So all we're doing is really making it more efficient. We're still not actually ending emissions altogether. It's going to be a long time before there's all emissions altogether can be diverted into another form. There's going to be still emissions somewhere for a long time to come, but making it more efficient just seems a very simple way to reduce the overall amount of those gases in the atmosphere. So that's the easy, simple solution. But you're certainly not going to shut down all the power plants either that produce those gases. That's the other problem. They're going to use electricity for your cars, and those power plants are also going to be not green, as it were, for a very long time to come. So they'll still be putting out. There'll still be coal plants putting out emissions, but those coal plants have layers and layers of emissions that your average truck does not. So the truck is spitting out a whole bunch of stuff very inefficiently is the only difference. They're still going to be spitting out stuff, but the inefficiencies of the current system is all we're really doing.
That makes logical sense to me.
And it's very simple logic, and it's also where the climate extremists, they think that moving to green is going to completely greenify the entire system. The most honest thing to say is that we're just making it more efficient, but we're certainly not getting rid of all the emissions that are coming out, because you would have to give up all the plants that generate the electricity. Not going to happen anytime soon.
So I got some quick data for you. So the American Trucking Association says that there are 3 million active semi-trucks on the road.
Right.
And that the trucking industry, they employ about 3.5 million people in the United States, and they account for 70% of all the freight in the United States.
Right.
Yeah, so I'm all for, if anyone wants to get rid of fossil fuels, if you can figure out how to tackle that for me.
Yeah.
Just let me know. Because, I mean, I'm all for the greener, but I'm also for, one, poor people not starving and freezing in the winter and not being able to afford their basic bills.
I do need groceries to my local store.
Yes, and I want my wife and me to be able to go to Costco.
It's kind of important.
And Rayleigh's, because that's where we go.
Got to be able to
get all the stuff that we want to eat, because we got kids.
And there's always semis around Costco, because Costco's always dropping off the goods, man.
Yes.
And I think that's been often spoke about. Tesla semis are awesome, but they literally can't make enough. Like the demand, it's already backed up so many months just in pre-orders. Like you could not go to store and you couldn't go to Tesla store to get one right now. By any
means. They're more expensive, but if you play the long game with them, they're supposed to be more affordable. If you look at your 10-year plan.
I would like to point out with this whole thing is the hard minerals that we need to mine to make these batteries has always been a point that we kind of gloss over.
That's another good example. So many of these things is where the oil is and where those minerals are. And the thing about the African thing is somewhat disingenuous when they say that that's the only place they can get it. These minerals are rare. When they say rare earth, they just mean that there's not like an ore of it. So like say you go and you find like silver, it's usually these minerals congregate in one single ore. The thing that's so frustrating about rare earths is they're scattered in small amounts everywhere in huge, there's lots of them, but they're just scattered everywhere.
It just translates to being hard to get out of the ground, right?
Exactly. Procure and concentrate and manufacture, all these things are difficult. But in terms of a lot of these are found in places that are unpopulated and are desert regions and are not all of them, but a lot of them are. So the thing that everyone's using the African thing as an aspect is that it's the cheapest way to get that. And that is unacceptable because that's ridiculous. So you're just going to have them do basically slave labor so you can have super cheap amounts, but nobody wants to scale it up in their neighborhood and that kind of thing. If you want those, then and that's why, in my opinion, I support the Nevada projects because I've lived in Nevada my whole life and I love Nevada, but a lot of it is completely empty and completely devoid of life. I mean, it's not all life, but it's certainly not a lush green field full of cities and lives and people. The regions they're talking about is north of Winnemucca, and I've been there before.
There's nothing out there.
It's pretty rough. The other main area is near north of Las Vegas. It's northwest of Las Vegas, and generally considered you're nearing Death Valley. It's considered one of the most miserable places on earth. So it's just with low water amounts as well. So in those regions, I don't really see a problem if you need to extract them from those areas. If you're in the middle of a highly urbanized and a healthy, beautiful area, and then you want to rip that all up to try to get a few of these minerals, that's unacceptable, obviously. But a lot of these, again, they're finding them that you can build huge. You could rate up the amount that you need for cobalt and for lithium in these places where, frankly, I drove to Las Vegas to Reno my whole life, and you go valley after valley after valley, and there's nothing, So another good example of that as well is, why do you need to put solar panels all up in people's neighborhoods and cities when you could build enough to supply the United States in a few of those valleys? Sure, the infrastructure cost would be significant, but I think that goes back to our chat last time. If you're only spending 3% of the federal budget on energy infrastructure, imagine if you did 5%, and then you actually built an entire production facility in those empty valleys. My entire life, they've been empty. There's nobody lives there. In fact, if anything, those valleys are getting less people moving away. So it just seems like those are the kind of compromises we need to make. The thing about energy and these green debates is there is no free lunch. So if you expect you're both going to maintain perfect pristineness of the environment, as well as have huge scaling of millions of cars produced every year, those two things are by nature at odds. You cannot have your cake and eat it too. That's the physics of reality.
Yeah.
So as soon as we all kind of grow up about that and kind of take a more mature approach, some areas are going to have to be devastated for industry. I didn't make the physics. It's just, if we want millions of cars, that's so what we could do is be smart about where we build those, though. Way smarter than we're doing right now. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's your take on it, Jesse?
Twisted.
More specific.
Well, I do want to be gentle about it, because the one in southern Nevada is already scaled up and is not controversial. The one above Winnemucca is, because it is considered native lands, and so I do understand that. But the population of the area and the fact that nobody actually lives in it, but it's just been designated as sacred land to them, I understand that, and that makes it difficult, and I totally get that. It's a tough situation, but the way I also look at it is there's a tribe in Oklahoma that gets all of its gaming revenue, and then it actually doesn't get taxed by the federal government, and instead distributes that tax revenue to every single person who is a registered member of the tribe. And I think it works out to like $2 million per tribe member. So their lives have been completely transformed. And I just wish that if they do that, then they need to well compensate the tribes and make sure that they get a share of the revenue for the production of whatever's being built there. So that is, but it's difficult on the grounds of it is in their lands of designated, even though it's not highly populated. It is. There's been lots of protests, and they've actually shut down Lithium America's production a couple times, trying to get the plant going, because they've got federal approval, but they keep lawsuits continue actual production from beginning there. And if I could say one more thing, the great one thing about it is where Winnemucca is, and Tesla continues to want to expand its Reno and Northern Nevada production, you would then have a production pipeline where you're actually literally getting lithium in Nevada and then transporting it to Reno. You could scale up the plants. That's jobs and good times for everybody. Yeah. That's Elon's essential plan, and their plan is to scale production in America, and then you could feed those plants, and China would continue to shrink as the major. Right now, we have to get a lot of our lithium from China. So,
yeah, I'm all for creating a mine wherever the free market allows, and if there is a fair market price. And what is fair market price? If your Indian reservation says, I want $100, and the mine company says, I will pay you $100, that is what's considered a fair market price, because both parties are agreeing. So as long as we allow the market to work itself and we don't use what is that? There is a term where the government will actually take land. I don't know why I can't think of what it's called.
Oh yeah, like eminent domains and
special
stuff like that.
Eminent domain, yes,
Yeah.
which has been highly abused in our country.
For sure.
And they will offer fair market price, which only one side agrees to, usually the buyer, not the seller, and say, I'll buy this from you for $40. And they're like, but I wanted $100. It's like, well, eminent domain, here's your $40 and get going. So as long as everyone agrees, I'm all for creating a mine in southern Nevada, northern Nevada, Utah, Oklahoma.
For sure, yeah.
And as long as we're just making sure people's water's not fucked. That's my two caveats.
Yeah.
My two
I agree too,
caveats.
Yeah. And you have to,
Don't fuck up the water
extra money
for that. And just make sure that we have a fair market price. If the Indians want to sell their land, if they don't, if a rancher wants to sell his land, good for them.
Right. As we can see, like the NIMBY situation, like in California, not in my backyard, you can literally cause super problems if you can't enforce eminent domain. But what it has been abused is they do eminent domain, and then they give them often the 1/3 of the accepted value of the property.
Mm-hmm.
That's unacceptable. That's completely unacceptable. They would have to do the standard accepted market price, what you go on Zillow and that land is worth. The government's going to have to pay for that, not 1/3 of that. That's unacceptable. That's what they often did, is they would use it actually as a tool to literally. And then often what's even more crazy is then private sellers would get it. So they got the greatest deal ever, essentially. So you would pay for 1/3 of it. So yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, if they give them fair market value for it, the issue is that since it's tribal sacred land, it's more the principle of it actually than in terms of I think they've all come to agreement long ago in terms of price. Similar to the casino, there's so much revenue that they could set a price, and the demand for lithium is so high that I don't think that's. In fact, I'm invested in some lithium companies just because even the lowest estimates on demand is amazing. So unless they develop a new battery technology, it's unlikely that the demand is going to drastically change. In fact, it'll be very high for a long time. So those tribes should be well compensated because that's a high value. It's essentially like a new oil. So they need to be compensated as such and need to have like a UAE kind of revenue kind of thing going on. But it is considered it's more that principal aspect from what I understand. But I'm not an expert on it, so by any means. Winnemucca, let's see what the Winnemucca lithium mine.
Yeah, I know that this Carstairs household will be getting a Tesla, maybe even a.
Me too. Yeah.
Support Team Elon. Laura fucking hates getting gas, so I always get gas for her. I make sure I fill up her cars, and if she doesn't ever have to get gas, she's just gonna be that much more excited. And I want to support Elon.
I like the idea too of like my charging is that my gas is filled up at home. So at the end of the day, I just put it in the garage and that's
like
it's my own
in
thing.
Your phone. Yeah,
I just can't bring myself to support the number one electric car maker in the world, which is GM, according to our federal government. I just, I want to root for the underdog, which is Tesla.
I can't think of it.
Yeah. Apparently, yeah.
That was one of the most brash things I've ever seen of how misrepresenting they were because of Ford's union and GM's unions. I've never seen such a distortion. The postings that they were putting out in terms of that GM's the number one automaker in electric. Who can even say one electric car that they've made? The only one I can think of is the Ford Lightning, and it's a truck. But any car that they've made, I can't even. Everyone knows
not
it's
fully electric. Yeah, no, definitely not fully electric.
Ford has the Ford Mach-E, which it came out with before the Ford Lightning, but the Biden administration didn't even say Ford was number one. They said GM.
Right.
They said GM was number one.
So yeah, think of any GM electric vehicle at all.
One.
There's not one. And literally, they were saying that they are the greatest producers. the fact that they were completely ignoring Elon was a brash and just shocking. I was shocked. Like, you're not even going to acknowledge the market. I can Google the data. That's crazy that you would say that. That's
those are one of those turning points where you realize how just biased
for sure.
the
How
government
much
is
the unions paid them to say that, and how little they were taking into account the actual figures. That's pretty stunning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Elon also says he didn't donate to the Biden campaign also, so he felt that was a factor because he was I didn't donate that year.
And yeah, the unions have been beasts of Democratic sponsorship for a long time. That's ingrained, it's part of the thing. And Biden especially wanted to lean into that, like, well, I'm the working man's president, so it's all about the unions. Unfortunately, these unions are doing super well and are not anything indicative of who makes the best electric cars. So that was a complete falsehood in every way.
So yeah, GM, they had the Chevy Volt, which they came out with, which they also discontinued in 2019. And they were losing.
No one's buying it.
They were losing $20,000 each time they sold one. And they lost $20,000.
To kind of point out why everyone likes Tesla stock so much in investor world and stuff is because the margins per car are very good. So even like how much they can still squeak out of a profit per car is in terms of heavy industry, it's never going to be like software, obviously, right? But it's very good for a car company. So that's still very impressive that they're even able to do that at all, because all these other ones are usually building at a loss.
Yeah, and that's crazy because it's like a brand new technology. I mean, not brand new technology, but a brand new manufacturing processes. Yeah, exactly. Which is crazy.
In like GM, they have the Hummer EV, SUV, Cadillac. Everyone has one now. Jaguar has an electric car, Beamer, Mercedes. Pretty much everyone has their own electric car, Porsche. But I wonder where these guys would be if Tesla never had open patents. Because I'm sure everyone's just looking at what they're doing and they're going to go, all right, we're going to make it 99% the way they made it. We're just going to change the 1% and slap our logo on there.
That's hauntingly ironic.
And they still can't do it as well. And the reason I assume this is because everyone is coming out with an electric car that really has a range of 300 miles. Everybody's is 300 miles. And I think the little variation for 300, 312, 295 is just merely the weight that they're doing with their cars, which is why it's just a little bit different. The little subtle things that they're changing, because Elon's, all his cars are 300 miles, 320, 300. And it's like, did you guys just coincidentally come up with the same kind of mileage system, everyone? Or is it that your engineers were like, well, what's Elon doing? Let's just copy it.
Dude, that's so ironic considering the original Nikola Tesla and his relationship with patents getting stolen. Because that's just, I don't know, the parallels there. If like Nikola Tesla got all his patents used and no one actually...
Nobody paid him. And it's very similar in that they're kind of in a similar way. They're all copying Tesla again, but like he's leading the pack again, but no one's actually giving him credit.
Yeah,
exactly. They're not giving him credit again, and it's legally just using his shit.
Wow.
The Tesla Model 3 is the most sold car ever. They are also, just by sheer production, the second largest, and the only one that's higher is a Chinese company called BYD. But if you make what's more equivalent to a golf cart in terms of horsepower and slap out hundreds of millions of them, that's not really a fair comparison. If we were to say cars that are equal in a horsepower and range to a Tesla 3, Tesla would be the number one producer in the world of electric cars and sales. And the number one sales cars, according to this, is the Tesla 3 electric car. Not anything GM that I don't think there's anything GM in there whatsoever. So just ruthless lie. Totally lying.
One of these days we're going to have to talk about Nikola Tesla and his theory on the Great Pyramids.
Ooh,
I know
yeah.
Alex is gonna love that one.
Yeah, Ty knows what I'm talking about.
It's gonna be a really full of speculation, I'll tell you what, but it's gonna be
Hey,
interesting. It'll be good.
Alex, have you heard of that or no?
I haven't, but I always think of that stuff of the super brilliant people are on the edge of madness. So it's a
Yeah,
difficult thing.
that's one of
All
those.
right, so
Yeah,
yes,
for sure.
Alex is going to love it. We don't have to get into it today,
Yeah.
but Alex, I'm gonna say buckle up because it's
For
gonna be
sure.
a ride.
And the viewers too, because you don't
Oh
know about
yeah,
it. It's quite interesting.
I always try to be as grounded in reality as I can and not. That kind of goes to the thing that me and Ty were talking about the other day of with some of the issue. It's to jump topics and just just to the side, but uh, when trans people who think that there's multiple different sexes, it's okay if you think that, like you think that Lord of the Rings is real or something. But if you try to impose that on other people, that's where it becomes problematic. And I think a lot of these problems arise from is if you're actually trying to impose your fantasy on other people, that's a different thing than if you want to believe it, I guess, like I like to get into things of fantasy nature, watch TV shows and things like that. But
Mhm.
I don't actually think that's real, So in that case, I would say try to stay as grounded as you can. And it would be super hard to show enough evidence to say that those pyramids are built by anything but people. There's all half-built
yes,
ones everywhere.
no,
There's
people.
half-built ones, and the
He
aliens would be
doesn't.
more
We're
It's
productive.
not
not going
that
to
far
try and get
fetched,
into it,
but
but Nikola Tesla doesn't think aliens did anything, just what they were used for.
I
And
see,
then, so here's one other thing. I'm going to meet you in the middle of where you are on being grounded on things.
for sure.
If the Wright brothers were grounded, they would have never invented flight.
For sure, but I mean, like the rules,
All
the
right, I'm
physics,
just saying you got to
the
just
the
you
physics
got to
by
be
which
willing
they
to
took off. They
don't
said,
live too much into grounded reality. Otherwise, we wouldn't have flight.
well, I think that's kind of confusing the two things because one is the people who said you could never take flight and with your wings on your back, and we still can't do that. But if they said you can apply physics to have lift, then your plane will lift off. And so they were still what I mean is they're very still much grounded, the White brothers were in actual physics. And we always have to try to stick to
yeah,
that. If
I
we
think
start moving into aliens, the amount of proof that you'll need to say that they built it is where you're getting
I
far
agree.
beyond the range of measurable things,
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree.
So,
And we're not saying
like that,
anything
yeah.
about aliens building anything.
What
For
did they
me, it's
use it
more
for
like
then? What are you saying? Like,
well,
Next week,
we'll get
next
into it.
week,
Yeah, but
next
for
week.
me, it's
I'm gonna be interested if he, like, I don't understand if he didn't
'Cause-
think they built them, then I was like, what?
No, it's not who built them; it's what they were used for.
Oh, what they're useful. Well, that could definitely be. I'd be,
yeah.
more
So
open for that for
for
sure.
me,
Yeah.
for me, it's kind of like the Albert Einstein, where you apply your imagination within the realm of actual physics, right? So your imagination doesn't actually exist in reality or physics, but you apply it within the realm, and then that,
Right.
Yeah,
kind
what
of
is applicable
what is
to
applicable.
physics?
Yes.
Gotcha. He thought the pyramids were energy generators, and that's a simple fix. Like, use the
You're
physics
fucking
we can
looking
measure.
it up. We're supposed to wait. He's
Way to ruin
Googling.
it,
He's
Alex.
cheating.
Way to ruin the whole thing.
Way to ruin it.
Well, I think the only one who didn't know is me at this point. I think a lot of people have heard that one, and I even now that I see it, I know it's well. And that's an easy fix. If you can measure those energies, then great. That's bam. If you can't
So-
measure them, then it's like again, like if they're unmeasurable energies, then is it really more than a fantasy until you can measure them? And that's just the kind of thing I'm saying is, but you're right. We could definitely go more in depth into it and have more like details, but
Yeah, because
it's the easy fix. If you can't measure it, I don't, it's like
he
hard to
details
fix.
why the different structures in the top of the pyramid, because it's built completely different, and then because there's never been, I'm not going to say never because I don't know that. And some of like the Great Pyramids, they initially were thought of as being tombs, but then we realized that there actually wasn't any tombs in there, in the different rooms that were in there, on why it was an energy conductor. And he goes into like a detailed process of why they could have been energy conductors at one point in time, which is
Except
pretty
there's
interesting.
huge amounts of evidence that they were tombs, though, right? By archaeologists. So
Was
the
it
archaeologists
all
have
of them
actually.
though, or
Oh
is
yeah,
it
for
was
sure.
it the?
Well,
I thought one of them, the great one, was not.
I think what is useful for this kind of stuff, because it's so the range is consensus, because all we can do
Yeah.
is try to. So if let's say the vast majority of people in a field, there's always going to be outliers to say one thing or the other, but let's say the vast
Yeah.
majorities agree on it, and I would say by far the vast majority of archaeologists agree that they're tombs, and it'd be cool if they were transmitters of energy actually, but so like that's implying that the ancient Egyptians had higher energy production than we do, and energies that we can't measure would essentially be the implication, right? If those are energy transmitters, they were generating energy that we can't measure now with our current technology.
So are we
Right?
getting into this topic right now, or
We might be because
are we just okay?
all right. So
I thought we were saving this for next time, but I guess we're just getting into it.
AI search on Bard, it says not all the pyramids were tombs. The Pyramid of Giza was a tomb, but the other ones around it, however, were not used as tombs. For example, Bent Pyramid of Dashar was built for Khufu or whatever.
Who was the pharaoh? So that would have been many of them were built for pharaohs who died before they were finished. So it would be it's kind of like they weren't actually used for tombs because the person who was supposed to have it finished and died before it was supposed to be completed. Also, the Sphinx is a good example of where that is correct. It's not a tomb. So it was a big elaborate construction, but it was not. That's true. Not all the pyramids. I think the big giant ones were tombs though.
Yeah, some of them were used for purposes such as astronomical observatories, but not all of them were tombs. Because he talks about the specific ones that he feels were used for energy, not just the tombs.
Right. Which again, if we had any measurable thing of it, I would say, okay, that makes sense. What becomes difficult is that they had some energy source that we can't measure now. 5,000 years ago.
I don't think it was a different energy source. It was more like Tesla applying what he understood about DC energy to the same physics that the pyramids could actually produce theoretically.
Again, according to Bard, Nikola Tesla believed that pyramids were more than just tombs for pharaohs. He thought that the pyramids were energy generators that could produce free, limitless energy. I think it's also important to point out that he spent the second half of his life and ran through all his money trying to do the wireless over-the-air energy. So he was on the edge of hopes and dreams, and perhaps the ambitions were greater than his ability to, because we still are struggling with trying to do over-the-air energy transmission at scale. But he made great strides in like a lot of the modern cell phone industry and many telecommunication technologies were fundamentally created by things of him trying to do that over the air. But his actual ambition for his funding failed throughout his life. And he, of course, famously ended up poor, and his famous ending story is always tragic because he was one of the most brilliant thinkers, I would say, ever. But that's a tough one, just in that he thought that the pyramids were energy generators that could produce free, limitless energy. Tesla believed that.
I don't think it's necessarily like he was thinking that they were just, like turning on light bulbs and stuff. I think it was more of like a ceremonial, because I think he was saying that the top was plated in gold or something like that, and something with the conduit energy. I can't remember. I'm gonna have to look it up, but
for sure. And I have heard before that actually in the time, in ancient times, they were covered with limestone, so the pyramids themselves were actually white, not the current color they are today of sandstone.
Yeah,
they were. They were built with sandstone. Then they were covered with a layer of limestone, so it actually made them shine. And then there was in a few of them put expensive metals on top at the very tip of the top. But sandstone and limestone are not very conductive. All rocks are not good conductors of electricity, so that itself would be a difficult. That's what it have to be an energy that we don't. we don't know
insulator.
of. You know?
What about as an insulator to enclose it?
I think rocks in general are very poor with energy management, right? That's why we don't use them for any. We don't use them for like pretty much anything to do with electricity, just because they both bleed energy and they don't contain it well and travel it well either, because they're not good conductors or absorbers of energy. But I mean, you know, this one's way out there. In my opinion, this one's pretty out there. But like I said, we want to attribute, it's amazing, the pyramids, we want to attribute more than they are to them, because they're amazing and they're so massive that they just, and especially that the fact that they're well documented to be dated to be built around 5,000 years ago. And the idea that these people built these things 5,000 years ago, you just think, wow, there had to be some other thing that did this. It can't just be these people that did this. But that's I got to push back on that one. That's a tough one. I don't see much of the thing of that, especially because we can't measure it. If there was some measure, if there was energy like coming off of it, or like lightning bolts were constantly striking it or something cool like that, you know, and you're like, okay, well, something's going on there. But it's just it's sandstone. It's huge blocks of sandstone stacking on each other that aren't particularly good at conducting. I think there was gold put on the top. Yeah, wasn't there like gold and silver put on the very tippy top of the pyramids? Let's see what it is. Pyramids top, Giza, made of gold. The capstone was often covered in gold. The capstone, and I think where that comes in is actually, have you guys ever heard the term of electrum? So there's actually metals when you go to mine them that they're actually a mixture of gold and silver. So they're not quite fully pure gold and they're not fully pure silver. And they've always called them ever since then electrum, because it's a mixture of both of them and it looks cool. Mm-hmm. But the capstone was made of electrum, a mix of gold and silver. The capstone would have looked like a pointy jewel at the top of the pyramid. The capstone was long taken, and even the limestone on the side that made it all white was removed, and now there's only the sandstone underneath it. But that's one of those things that I'll call out Elon too. That's a great example. And to another thing is, Nikola Tesla was brilliant, but he wasn't right on everything. And Elon's super smart on other things, but he's not right on everything, and he's not infallible. So I guess that's a good point of where, it could be a situation of. But that's my job on this podcast, is I'll be the super grounded guy, and then everyone else can kind of speculate on more wild things. But that's my job. So.
Yeah,
I have to look into this more because I didn't think we're talking about it right now.
Me neither. Let's get prepared, because I got a bunch of information I want to share on it. But I say we wait till next week.
For sure. Yeah, this one I'm going to push back on. So you guys will have to bring some good information for me to consider it, because right now.
And it's not saying, we're not saying that it's a thing that is definite.
For sure.
We're saying that there possibly could be a viable theory. And there's no way to tell
at this point.
Well, hold on. Yeah, at this point you can say it's hogwash.
For sure.
But let us actually come with the heat and tell you why he actually thinks it, because there was a guy actually wrote a book on it, a guy who met Nikola Tesla, called The Secret of the Pyramids by Peter Tompkins.
Mm-hmm.
He met with Nikola Tesla before he died in the 30s. And so he wrote a book on everything that Nikola Tesla thought about it. But anyways, we'll talk about it another time. He's looking up the book right now.
I know.
That also speaks to an issue of the chariot of the gods, which really started the alien craze that they built the pyramids. And that guy was actually not an archaeologist in any way. He was the owner of a hotel in Netherlands. And so we've now gone that was in the 60s, I believe. Let me see when it was first published. But that was 1968. He was not an archaeologist or anything, but people so wanted it that it was by far one of the best-selling books of that subject ever. It's absolutely killed it and still kills it. Many people have now gone and made careers like the Aliens History Channel show, literally based around the concepts of Chariot of the Gods, even though, again, he was never an archaeologist. He was literally a hotel owner. So these kind of, you start from the Chariot of Gods as your source that you're citing, but that is not useful in any meaningful way if Eric von Daniken, who wrote it, is not a archaeologist and never had any formal training or even studied the pyramids formally before he wrote a book about the Chariot of the Gods, which is the super famous one in regards to, it involves the hypothesis that technologies and religions of the ancient Egyptians were given to them by ancient astronauts who were welcomed as gods. So a good story is different than, and using that as sightings is different than, and also even on here it says as seen on Ancient Aliens on the History Channel. So the fact that History Channel makes one of their most popular shows is Ancient Aliens doesn't mean that there's any connection to any reality whatsoever. That's very
aliens?
This whole line of thing to me is Lord of the Rings. Like, you're starting at Chariot of the Gods and you've never deviated from that. And now you have a whole TV show. It's super popular in America. I remember lots of my friends used to watch it, but it's still never actually connected to any grounded reality at any point in its whole entire thing. So it's still,
but I'd say you're citing an extreme as aliens, and what we're talking about is more as basically a battery. An ancient battery, which is not as far-fetched as aliens, I'd say.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah,
no, I agree.
I would just say that one of the most
aliens
popular.
A couple times. Yeah, I just am not sure where that, because I feel like I'm not saying anything to do with aliens.
Yeah.
Unless you're giving just an example on how far-fetched things can end up.
Yeah, for sure, exactly, and also how popular they can be, because HBO, History Channel's by far most favorite show is now not the actual history of Rome, but Ancient Aliens and Pawn Shop. So the two highest ratings is Pawn Shop and Ancient Aliens, but they are never grounded in any, like, they often cite Chariot of the Gods, again, as it says here, as they're, like, they'll say, well, yeah, since Chariot of the Gods said this, then that doesn't mean anything because he was a hotel owner. That's not useful sightings. So I'm just saying, yeah.
Yeah, it's a little different from someone who's actually spoken with the guy himself, though. You know what I mean?
For sure, yeah. So yeah, exactly. But speaking to somebody and being able to pick up a measurement from the pyramid are also two different things as well. Right. And like I said, I would, if there was some measurement coming from the pyramids, I would immediately be more interested in terms of that as a potential thing. The inventor Nikola Tesla esoteric beliefs included unusual theories about the Egyptian pyramids. One of his beliefs was that the Great Pyramids of Egypt were giant transmitters of energy. He built Tesla towers according to laws inspired by studying the pyramids. But, again, like, just because a triangle can be good at conductive doesn't mean the pyramids are. Just if a triangle shape is good at conducting doesn't necessarily mean that sandstone that's in a pyramid shape is good at conducting electricity, So those are two different things. It'd be much more difficult. And again, if there was any energy coming off of it, it'd be great. But as far as I know, unless you guys got any information that there's measurable energy.
Well, it's not like they're in use today. You know what I mean? It's not like they're in production today. You know what I mean?
Right.
So there wouldn't be any energy being produced from them to measure. Right?
Yeah. So you're saying like the technology of this advanced thing fell apart a long time ago, which, I mean, that's possible.
If you think about it, the Egyptian archaeologists themselves even denied that there was ever lush land and massive amounts of water that eroded the Sphinx and the pyramids themselves. When we as American archaeologists know that there was actually lush land and far more water than there is now in Egypt. No one just lives in a fucking desolate desert for no reason.
Right. Yeah, I think that kind of goes to something we were talking about the other day is like oftentimes those kind of viewpoints that they find from the archaeologists are perceived as, on Twitter at least, as liberal nonsense and stuff like that. But often the original findings, like for example, the original standards of the dynasties was made by highly conservative archaeologists in the 1920s. And many of these guys, based on their own writings, were quite, we'll just say, very conservative in their writings towards the people. So these are the cores of that. Is it's definitely not just like a new thing that was made in modern universities. A lot of the concepts of modern Egyptology comes from decades of study that's been reiterated and improved upon. So it would be difficult to say, and I know it's not the same thing that you're saying. I totally acknowledge that, but often these are built by consensus over decades. So if one paper, like that's the biggest thing I think I see with today's problem is we see one newspaper that comes out and say, like, let's say one research paper says the pyramids have been totally proven to be false. They're not even real. They're made up. One paper that's fine, but to actually build consensus is going to take decades of research, not just one paper. And that applies to superconductors, for example, or all the physics of the world that we're studying, like black holes and dark stars and dark energy. One paper does not equal the new consensus. The consensus is developed over time, and that gives you your best chance to be accurate, because then you got people who push against it and people who are for it, and then somewhere in the middle you find a more accurate reality to it. So just in that sense, I'm not saying that it isn't, but if we find more papers over time that show that there's energy production at the pyramids, I'm not saying I will outright deny it if we can build a consensus towards that. But as of right now, it's like, if only Tesla said that, I guess is what I'm saying. If only Tesla said that, then that's not enough to say. That's not consensus. We would need much more than that to say that there's anything. Despite his brilliance, he was brilliant, but also brilliant people say crazy shit. So I'll do quotes of what brilliant people said that.
Hey Howard, who is that guy that I like? I keep brain farting. Who's friends with Randall Carlson?
I'm not too sure. Can't think of him either.
He would talk about how, like, with LiDAR, we understand that Brazil was a cultivated jungle.
Oh, yeah.
And there used to be civilizations in there.
That's a great example, because the consensus is changing on that. The 1920 archaeologists were like, that's preposterous, that's crazy, that's nonsense. And now there's definitely emerging consensus that there's far more out there in those forests than they had ever imagined. So that's a great example. That's where the consensus is changing. Also, many of the most prominent Egyptologists today are actually not Europeans or Americans, but they're actual Egyptians. So some of the biggest ones are actual Egyptians now, and so they have none of the biases that you could say that are applied to previous archaeologists as well, from European or colonial type of things, that Africans could never make pyramids and things of that nature. That was often bandied about as an excuse, instead of that somebody else had to make them, like aliens or white people. That's obviously emerging and changing as well, and the evidence continues to show that clearly Egyptians made the Egyptian stuff. Were they all African? Were they what they looked like and stuff? That's far more nuanced. But in terms of who made them, I don't. That's pretty heavily consensus. Egyptians made it. In general.
I thought it was. I don't think the Egyptians even claim that they make it. It was the people before the Egyptians, right? It was the Anukai or something like that? Anuki or something like that?
No, Khufu was the pharaoh of Egypt, and he made the Great Pyramid of Egypt, for sure. Super well documented. Khufu is highly known. In fact, generations later, it was a reputation amongst the Egyptian people that Khufu was a terrible pharaoh because he was so brutal to his own people, forcing them to build this massive pyramid that was absolutely humongous and required so much of the nation's resources just to build a giant pyramid.
Gotcha.
to his death. Khufu was the second pharaoh of the 4th dynasty. He ruled during the Old Kingdom period. And what's so crazy is a lot of these pyramid builders were at the early part of Egyptian history. And then for all the other thousands of years of Egyptian history, they did not build them. But you can say, okay, why did they do that? But you can also say perhaps that building a giant thing in the middle of the desert that everyone's going to rob as soon as you die is not the best use of resources. And even the Egyptians could recognize that. So that's generally the consensus. Again, all we can kind of do is go by that kind of established consensus, and that consensus can change. I'm totally not against that. The consensus can change over time, but the well-established consensus of, like, for example, the dynasties, where those videos were like Egypt's 150,000 years old by just like one report that came out or something. The general consensus has been established for decades of research that the dynasties line up with the actual writings that we have, as well as the writings on the walls of the temples, as well as layers and layers of consensus have been built up. And one paper does not suddenly throw all of that out in any field, even archaeology, even not just archaeology, like any field, like medical or anything, or science or anything. Consensus is hard to build. And it's usually not nearly as fancy as aliens came down, or fun as they came down. They built like super crazy things, and they had this whole magical world, and things was all getting laser beams, shit. So
Alex,
we're not talking about aliens.
Alex, do you remember on Christmas when you bought me that book, Magicians of the Gods?
Yes. It was on your wish list though. Like,
yes,
I wouldn't have got that for you. I wouldn't have got that for you. So I just
yes, it was by Graham Hancock. Did you? Because I remember you saying, that guy said that aliens built the pyramids. Were you confusing it with Chariot of the Gods?
No, because Graham has a different. I think Graham has another one. His highly popular show, right, has a different approach. He was talking about that humans had a more spiritual, like, energy connection. There was like different, like, evolved humans, right? That's like the main thing of his thing is humans were different then, and were more connected in different energy links and stuff than they are now. And that's why those devices don't work, and why those things don't work and stuff like that. But again, that's cool. But the consensus required to show that in any meaningful way is going to take a lot of research, not just one dude saying that and then citing like something is not enough.
So those things with Graham Hancock are kind of inaccurate, because he just believes that there was ancient civilizations who had greater knowledge of engineering and astronomy, which was allowed them to build these great things. And then you got guys like Randall Carlson who say that there was a cataclysmic event, a massive flood about 18,000 years ago, and that kind of wiped out civilization.
Right.
And so he says we have like amnesia, on that we were great engineers, we were great at astronomy, which is why so many things line up with different constellations and stuff in the sky. Nothing to do with aliens or that we had great energy.
Gotcha.
Just that.
Yeah, I'll get off the alien thing because I know that's. But I'm just saying that it's one of the most popular shows that Americans are taking as actual facts is Ancient Aliens on the History Channel, and
I've never seen that, and I didn't know if it was coming off as truth or just this is fun. Whether it's
I think for lawsuit, I mean, for certain purposes, they can't say it's absolute truth, but they often speak as it is, and use Chariot as the gods as their citing for where they get their sources. And again, it was actually written by a non-related in the field whatsoever person who told a great story, because it's a great story. Again, I think we kind of mix that up, that how important that stuff is, like stories. And Lord of the Rings, it inspires us, even if it's not factually true. And I think that's the great story of Chariot of the Gods, that some high being built the pyramids, is really cool in its conceptualization. You think of it like, wow, wouldn't that be cool that they came down like in that movie, and like they just came down, like they're building shit, and like we worshipped them as gods. The whole concept just seems very cool. But again, to build consensus on that would take.
Hold on one. You guys keep talking. I gotta Jackson and my dog went outside.
For sure, would take significant thing. Magicians is the sequel to Fingerprints of the Gods and presents new evidence that has emerged for a great lost civilization of antiquity for a global cataclysm that destroyed most civilization almost 13,000 years ago. The one I've always had trouble with since I heard about this is a dinosaur bone is generally measured to be 65 million years old. And most dinosaur bones have been destroyed over time. So you only have the 1% rule. Almost everything will not make it, but there'll always be a 1% on average that'll survive in physics. And so these bones are not made nearly as a carbon. Their actual molecular structure isn't nearly as stable as certain types of plastics and modern materials that we make that are often measured to last many tens of thousands of years. And so a few 1% of those would become fossilized and then would last for even longer than dinosaur bones. But we've not found a single one, is at least as of this date. And that's exactly like an example of if we started to find those and then they built more evidence of it and then they started to build a consensus around it and stuff like that. That's exactly the kind of stuff that gets me excited is when we find those kind of things, and those are being found. One that is I can't say it, but it's that place they found in Turkey, Göbekli Tepe or whatever it is. That's been proven to be far older than the initial estimates of such large-scale temple building in human societies, but it's heavily based on the actual findings and then building a consensus around measuring those findings and measuring the actual sites and things like that. So let's just say even 99% of all that advanced civilization stuff got destroyed. Physics alone would have a great probability that there's going to be at least some left. And the fact that we haven't found any, even though we can find much older things like dinosaur bones, it leads to a strange like, where is it then?
That's because you're framing it and the way that you see the world right now, right? You see us as technology, as plastic. You see technology as that. But what if it wasn't a frame in that case where they didn't need to create that kind of long-lasting materials like the Sphinx? The face that you see on the Sphinx wasn't the original face, right? So what I'm saying is that we could have taken the technology that was passed down, the 1%, and recycled it to make it look like that 1% was actually what we, do you see what I'm saying?
I will concede that maybe they used some different technologies, but if that was the case and we're trying to say that they were more advanced or as advanced, what were those technologies, I guess, first? And then how would those be built
more advanced than we thought originally? That's what I mean. More advanced. Yeah. So it's not like they had flying cars, like they were more advanced than we were. That's not what we're saying.
I think that's kind of the controversy of Graham's books, right? Is that he actually said that we had a better civilization in the previous era, right? And that this one is not as good. But to be honest, I'm not sure.
Relative, right? Because if they were able to figure out how to not be pollutant, then that would be a better civilization than us, right?
For sure, yeah. And again, same kind of thing. Like the Göbekli Tepe has been shown to be around 13,000 years old. So that's just where I'm confused. Is like, so they didn't build any temples or anything, but their civilization was super advanced. And then I guess the other question would be, what would be the definition then of that advancement if it wasn't building materials or buildings or any of the things that we attribute to advanced civilizations and technologies? And I guess so, and that's totally fine. That's more of like maybe philosophically or something,
Well, you're saying that technology has a completely linear path, like a singular linear path. And I don't think that's very true.
I think actually that's what's been pretty well developed from the Sumerians and the writing system. Like literally, the cores of Sumerian came into Phoenician, and Phoenician is the core of our modern alphabet. So that's exactly kind of the examples of a linear technology.
There could be a million different ways that the alphabet could have been made.
Yeah, there's many different ways that it did, absolutely, and but they all have proof and can link back to their previous. For example, Chinese script was originally symbols on turtle shells, and then it evolved into the modern script. But they have a very clear, measurable line from those abandoned turtle shells to the current script, and you can even see some of the patterns of the symbol of that animal that then became the modern symbol of the cow.
Right, but that's
So,
not the only way for that language or any language to form, is what I'm trying to say.
oh yeah, for sure, yeah, absolutely, yeah. But again, we're talking about something that has. So you're saying like that has no proof, but we're supposed to. That's what I'm saying is like we need some, right? There need to be some to make some kind of actual judgment on what's happening. I would just say in physics and in reality, we have to make some kind of measurement if we're to determine if it's actual real or not. Now, now I will totally concede that perhaps all of that was not was lost, and then we don't have any measurement of it, but it still existed. I will totally concede that yes, it could have easily existed. It's just that there's somehow, which is very probability unlikely, but still could happen, no doubt about it. There's that we just don't have any evidence of it, or even like with Gopeki Teki, we don't have evidence of it yet, because even 30 years ago, I think I told you guys before, like 30 years ago, the general consensus was amongst archaeologists that there wasn't something that old at that scale, as terms of pyramids. I mean, in certain terms of temple sizes that humans built. So
yeah, I think that's kind of where I sit too, where it's like I'm not for sure in that boat, but it's like it's possible. Could be possible.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I'll leave it open to the fact that if we can find some stuff, build some consensus, or if we can't find stuff around it, we have to. It's hard for me to accept it if we can't find any measuramental kind of aspects of it. The Hancock's Fingerprints of Gods, the book builds on the premise that a highly advanced lost civilization operated in prehistory, which is generally considered before the Sumerians, when we have our modern writing forms, so we could start to document things from across generations. Hancock sees an explanation for his catastrophe in a comet that hit 10,800 years ago. And that could have been one, but generally considered one of the hardest hitting ones ever was the one that killed off the dinosaurs. But even though that one hit, we still have evidence of dinosaur bones. Even though people often forget that when we see dinosaur bones, we're only seeing like 1% or even less of the actual all that used to be. So we're only seeing like a tiny little fraction, but even they made it across 65 million years. That 1% did. So to say
that's
that
true, but does highly advanced mean different bone structure entirely?
Well, highly advanced to me would mean polymers and building materials and technologies of nature that are even better built than a bone and would last therefore longer. So that's where I do struggle with that. And I'm not just trying to argue. Honestly, I'm just saying it's not fun to be the always the
we
guys
definitely
so
should have
grounded
saved
to the
this
earth.
for the next podcast. I don't know why we got into this fucking on this podcast, but now we got two podcasts and one podcast, I guess.
Yeah, I think what we should do with these is often just like kind of go off on a tangent and then break them up, because it doesn't need to be like a formal. Because I mean, if we try to constrict it too much, you know how that thing happens. Like everyone goes, you know what I'm saying? Like we're like, okay, now it's time to talk about this. And no one really says anything, or it becomes all stilted and, like let it flow. And then maybe, hopefully, we can try to cut it up as much as possible. I hope.
That's what I was going to say is if we can't cut it up, then I don't know. It might be all fucking funky and weird.
That's true. And if none of us are good editors yet, we're going to have to get real fancy. It's going to be real rough. But,
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. How long has this one been going on for? A couple hours now?
Yeah. It's 20 minutes short of 2 hours.
Oh, really? Why doesn't it show me anymore? Why can't I see it?
And for sure, like often these climate events and these asteroid strikes, they would totally change and wreck a bunch of shit and cause many ice ages and all this kind of stuff. But like I said, I'm totally not like closing my mind to it that it's impossible. It's definitely not. What I am is that the consensus needs to be built on it, and at this point, there's very, very little consensus on any of these. The flood myths are interesting because they seem to be all over the world. But you know, usually the consensus for that is that if you're a developing society, massive floods are extremely damaging to your society. So you're going to talk about it and write about it, and it's going to be an important thing in your culture going forward. If your past, your past region got wiped out by a huge flood, it's going to be dramatic and traumatic for that civilization, and they're going to write about it. And floods happen all over, as we see every day in the news, right? So it wouldn't just be like it's a worldwide flood. It was like one hit the Aztec area, so that's why they wrote about it. One hit the Cimarron area, etc. And they carry it over. But with that said, the exciting thing about archaeology right now is we're in a time of finding new, amazing stuff in the Amazon jungle, places that only a few decades ago said, that's impossible. There's nothing out there. The Göbekli Tepe, that's impossible. There's nothing that old at that scale. It's ridiculous. It's generally considered now to be abandoned around 8,000 BC. So that would be 10,000 years ago, which is the Sumerians are largely credited to be about 7,000 or 6,000 years old. So the oldest civilizations until recently has been 6,000. And they still generally are for writing because we haven't found any writing at Göbekli Tepe. But the scale of their pyramid, the scale of the temple or whatever this was it took manpower, it took organization. It was a big deal. So there's also this one in India that's fascinated me for a very long time. They call it the Indus civilization. For some reason they didn't write, but the amount of stuff that they've left behind is incredible. And they were clearly a very advanced civilization at about the same time as the Sumerians. So they were documented to be very old and very ancient. Not quite as old as the Sumerians. It says here 3,300 BC. So about 5,300 years ago. Yeah. So just, in the same time though, ancient, super ancient, when most of the rest of the world was hunter-gatherer, even still at that point, or just barely early stage agricultural. And so, they, and it was considered like a super big deal, but because we can't translate any of their writing, we have no idea of any of their kings, their leaders, their history, what happened to them. Nothing. It's just like this giant mystery, and they're super powerful cities that they built, but there's nothing that we have left to actually make sense of it. And the thing
I think that's where a lot of these things stem from, is that there's so much mystery and so much unknown that it's like we try to fill it with our own crazy, wacky ideas.
And I totally am also susceptible to that, because I'm fascinated by these who are mysterious. And then suddenly, if we translate it, we know all the answers, then it's not as
cool
it doesn't have that allure anymore. Yeah, it loses the allure, and I'm totally susceptible to that too, because some of my favorite are Indus and Elam, and those are super ancient and have very little documentation, and as a result, they're very, very mysterious. And but they built these big cities called Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, and they were big scale cities, at times, 50,000 plus people in them. We have very little evidence of it. At first, they thought the Aryans, who were tribes that were from the Indo-European speakers, came into India and actually destroyed the Indus Valley civilization. Now we have pretty significant evidence that the Aryans came way later. So the Indus civilization, the mystery about it is that it had already collapsed. It had already, the general boring answer and probably most accurate is that the rivers shifted, the climate changed, so the productive areas declined. But
Yeah.
It's now shown that the Aryan tribes that showed up, because again we call it Indo-European language group, because the Indians' modern Hindi is an Indo-European group that was brought by the Aryans. So these Indo-European speakers brought the language that now pretty much the third largest spoken language on earth is Hindi and its forms. So that came way later though than the Indus Valley, and it's often said for good reason that the Aryan tribes, who were like nomadic tribes, probably great warriors, but not agricultural they don't build buildings, they don't do that stuff, and a lot of the techniques for the Indian people later were the Aryans took from the Indus Valley technologies, right? So these guys knew how to build buildings basically in big fortresses. The Aryans were great warriors on the plains, but they weren't big builders of fortresses, right? So see what I'm getting at is that it was not like one dominated the other. It was actually that they came and mixed. But the Indus Valley civilization was already way past its prime and had declined by the time the Aryan tribes showed up. Modern Persian is Indo-European language that was also considered part of those same tribes. So those same tribes went into Persia, and another tribe went into India. And if you look on a map today, Iran and India are next to each other. So the tribes literally went in different regions, and you can see that. All at that same time, tribes were going into Europe who spoke those language groups. And so we even have similar gods and everything that even match all the way across, and from the one end of the continent to the other, to Eurasia to the other, is all linked through this Indo-European language group. And so that's
a good tell to where we kind of started out. That's because the language itself is a key to that.
For the Europeans and stuff, and for the Indians and stuff like that, their language groups and some of their gods and cultural stuff came from these nomadic tribal groups that spoke these language. I like to think of them as like horse lords, who were some of the first to domesticate horses. And I mean, even up until the Mongols, horses were supreme. So you could win battles if you had horses and you could manage them well. And so I think that was a major definer of why they seem to be in places that you wouldn't expect these language groups to be. They're scattered all across Eurasia and from one end to the other. So Chinese and those Sino groups are different. And then they have Afro-Asiatic, which is where Arabic comes from. One of the most other spoken languages on earth is Arabic. And that is a totally different language set and has different god structures and everything that came on a different, they're clearly separate than the Indo-European language groups, and including modern Indians and the Hindi.
Yeah, that's
so
crazy.
The language groups is really cool. There's a really cool channel that I found on YouTube where this girl who's like a linguistic person, she has a YouTube channel, and she breaks down the aspects of each language. And man, it's absolutely
so
fascinating.
Interesting.
Man,
it's etymology and all that stuff. Yeah, it's so interesting.
It's so crazy because the Basque are one of those that are probably, there's this theory that's not proven and probably will never be, is that there was definitely Europeans before these Indo-European ones showed up, and they spoke widely divergent language groups than modern Indo-European languages, right? And so Basque is considered like a language isolate. There's a few languages on Earth that seem to have no starting language that we can trace back. They seem to, like you said, they just made it. It's almost like it just originated out of nowhere on its own. But oftentimes what some of these language groups have been traced to is that the original language groups that they came from have been destroyed, and they're just like the remnant of what's left. And they think Basque is probably the remnant language of old Europe. So it was like what a lot of Europe spoke before the Indo-European horse lords showed up and started changing the dynamic there. But as a result, yeah, Basque is totally language isolate. It's not an Indo-European language. Is that crazy? It doesn't.
That is crazy.
Yeah, it doesn't line up to any of the other stuff that Indo-European does. So
I didn't know that.
That's a pretty Basque is
Basque originated? Is that like from the France area or southern?
Yeah, that's pretty close. Yeah, it's like northern Spain, southwestern French area, but it's mostly in Spain. Yeah, but yes, Basque is a language isolate, meaning it is unrelated to any other existing languages.
Nice.
And there's a few of those all over the world, and some of them are just also have a mysterious air about them because you're like, what? Where did you guys come up with this, and how did this get here? And pretty fascinating. It's considered a pre-Indo-European language, and again, this is the old Europe theory is not proven, and it's going to be super tough to ever without any documentation. But it's they're guessing that Basque was already there, and probably much more forms of it, and that language set. And then these horse lords showed up, and so changed the dynamics that the only ones to survive was Basque, just because it's super mountainous and super isolated and everything, etc. And probably for other reasons.
I've never heard of that. Yeah, that's interesting.
Another fascinating kind of mystery one is Sumerian. So the very first that we often credited with really starting civilization and kicking it off is also considered a language isolate. So let's just say, now I'm just saying, let's just say like you wanted to make a great story and say that the aliens gave it to them. You would have some good kind of side evidence for it by saying that Sumerian is a language isolate. It doesn't have any connection to any other language that came before or after it. So you would have a great story, but just because that doesn't mean there's other language isolates in the world, that are totally different from Sumerian and are not connected to Basque. You wouldn't, Sumerians and Basque, for example, do not connect. So they originated in their region. Most of the language, like Aramaic, became the most popular in the Middle East. And of course, what's an ancestor of Aramaic is Arabic. So they do have a link. So there is a link between the ancient spoken Afro-Semitic languages, what they call them, and there is a link between those to modern Arabic and other modern languages like Ethiopian languages. But there's no, like, where's the old language link to Sumerian? There is none that we can find. It just seems to have originated from these people. So with that said, all language is made up, like that Archer episode where that lady's like, it's a made up word. And then she was like, they're all made up. And she's like, mind blown. So they're all made up. But
I don't know what I missed. But Winston went around like 2 blocks and me and Jackson went and got him.
Oh no.
And you guys both understand because my dog.
Yeah.
People are just going to see him and think they're just going to stereotype. And all the people who stereotype, you know what I want to ask them? Is this how you act when you see a young black kid sagging his pants with his hat on sideways? You just fucking assume that they're fucking going to do something bad? Because people are. For the fucking YouTube world, if you guys want to know, I'm going to post a picture of my dog so you guys will be like, oh, okay, I get what he's talking about. Because people do. They get freaking so prejudiced against my dog. And he was just right down the street as soon as I called him.
Because your dog's not only like he's not only the pit bull size, but he's like
he's like horse size.
He's like
he's like a horse size pit bull. Yeah.
Extra.
He's like extra something.
Even though he's the sweetest puppy ever.
But I'm just going to say that with this kind of stuff, if we're going to talk about it, then bring a lot of evidence, because obviously I've read a lot about it. So
damn it,
it's
Alex,
like,
we were gonna do that, but you just went off on it. You're like,
He went
all
too
right,
much
I'm
into
gonna,
it.
I'm gonna look it up right now. Hold on, let me find out. And I'm like,
Yeah,
okay, well,
I
fuck.
shouldn't have even brought it up.
but
I
to be
know.
fair, I had already read up on it, so I have read up on it. So
I know, but you
guys
didn't pick up on the cue that we're leading that into the next episode of that.
And then he was already Googling.
Do you guys not already know it? Have you guys not already read on it? You guys should already know this material if it's important to you. It's like,
not the
Well,
details
it's been a while.
and all. Yeah,
It's
what
been
do
a
you
while.
mean? What?
if it's important. Well, meaning I was able to talk off the cuff because I've already read about it and
You
stuff like
looked
that.
it up. You looked it up.
You guys all have the internet. Come on. You guys can
We're
look it up.
gonna save it for the next time.
So what did I miss anything
True.
juicy?
We
Or
could
do I
save it
just
for the
gotta
next
watch?
time, but I'm saying if we're going to talk about this stuff, it can't. I don't want it to be just me lecturing you guys, because if you guys don't have the information either, then I want it to be a discussion.
Well, then you should have waited for the next episode.
Or you guys should have known your material beforehand.
We did know, but
I didn't know we were going to talk about
did?
Nikola Tesla.
I knew. I just didn't really want. Yeah, I just didn't think we were actually getting into it. I was like, oh, okay, so we're actually talking about it then. Okay, okay.
But one good thing is the podcast has gone 2 hours, which that is right now the like ideal niche that people are looking for, that really long form, not just 1 hour, but like 2 hours.
Yeah, but is it all
Really?
2 hours?
Wow,
hit
'cause
2
I
hours
was
just
thinking
now.
that we cut it up. I was even
Yeah,
thinking
I was
we
gonna
cut
say
this one
it probably needs to be cut up a little bit. This one definitely needs to be
because
cut
it
up.
really
Well,
does
it'll
have
be
like
good.
political modern stuff, and then it goes off onto this tangent for a long time. It goes off into this thing for a long time. So I guess if
Did
they
you guys
want
talk
two
more
different
about
things
it
in one
when I
thing,
left? Did you guys talk more about all that
Oh, yeah,
kind
for
of
sure.
stuff when I left?
we've been going
Yeah,
on
we were
this
talking
whole
about
time.
language and stuff. Yeah.
Good. I want to.
We've been going
I'm
this
gonna
whole
go back
time.
and
You can
listen
check
to
the
it.
podcast, and you can
I'm gonna
go back and check the
rewatch.
podcast on it.
Yeah.
Uh,
I was so glad that you guys are still here, so I could at least hit
For
stop
sure.
properly.
What were we just gonna stand up and leave, or just leave the thing?
That's it. I'm
Well,
done. I'm calling it. It's just
I'm
gonna be
out.
like a blank screen. There's gonna be nothing.
I was hoping you guys didn't close out all your stuff, exit out,
yeah.
because then when it saved the recording, and it was just
That's
like,
true.
no,
Yeah, that's
episode
true.
3 forever gone.
It's probably not good content because I was kind of just.
Oh shit,
No,
that's a
I
good.
wasn't very responsive,
Yeah, that's a
but-
good thing you said that, because will it do that if we do leave early or something? Huh?
Yeah, it
Will it
specifically
do that?
says
It won't
like
properly.
you got to hit the stop. I got to hit the stop, and then it got to continue to finish uploading, and then you guys are good to go.
Gotcha.
Good.
Did you send out that new Teams link,
Important.
Alex?
I'll send. I was gonna get those new emails. So now that I got the new emails, I'm gonna send that out, and then you just like your standard to Jesse to the Yahoo, right? And I'm gonna send that one. I was just
You can
saying
do
if you
either
wanted
or,
to
yeah.
make a new one, I'll send it just to that new account, because that's what Ty did. That's what Ty did. But I'll just send
Do
it
it
to your
to the
regular,
Yahoo.
right? Yeah.
Do it to the Yahoo, not my Proton.
For sure.
Did you guys see
Okay,
the
for
long
yeah.
response?
I do have both of those, but yeah, I don't.
I did, dude. I haven't read it yet, but that was a fucking book that you sent back.
Dude, I almost had it.
What was it? I didn't see it. What was it?
I finally replied to your dad
It was a book.
on the electoral.
Oh,
I
yeah,
noticed that
yeah.
Alex didn't even
Right,
directly
right.
reply. I noticed that Alex, was that like a
I'm not
pity
going to.
reply? I felt like Alex was like a pity reply. No one's replied, so I'm
There-
just gonna be like,
that's-
man, this is crazy, yeah. And I was like, that's such a just Alex going, oh,
For sure. As we were saying that one time, it's like,
No, yeah.
Yeah.
And
I'm just gonna.
so like I did respond,
Sorry,
but how I told you, it's like I don't have any interest in doing a full-on engagement like in person with him anymore, or even via email, because the topic kind of gets changed when you send something. But this is something that like I'm pretty passionate about, the electoral college and like the fundamentals of the republic and versus
Gotcha, right,
democracy. So I didn't reply with anything like you're wrong, this is wrong, or I don't know anything about the governor when he's like the governor sucks. If you want to debate me about the governor, because did you see that part? So I didn't even reply about any of that because I'm like, whatever.
Yeah, I think he's just
only replied
Republican.
specifically about the electoral college and how that goes, because technically people can submit their votes, their electoral votes, for a different candidate in the history of it. So I just put the history of the change of the electoral college and how over time the voting system has changed.
That's actually a really smart approach, because if you just like provide information on a topic instead of try to debate on a specific like speculation of some news article or something, then just give them like the history of the electoral college. Wouldn't that
That's
seem to
all I
be
did.
more helpful?
Yeah. It's really all I did. And how he was like, how are these guys not charged? I put like, well, they didn't break any law, and I put a comparison in there, one that we've talked about before. I'm like, I get Republican friends who get fired up about Hunter Biden now going to jail over accepting money from Ukraine, Russia, China, but he didn't break any laws. So there's no reason for him to go to jail for those. Maybe meth and hookers, but not this. So when that article was saying that those people aren't charged, it's like, well, yeah, because they're not breaking any law.
Right.
That's the same thing with the tax laws and why everyone was so pissed off at Trump, because Trump just pointed out that the tax laws are so fucked.
Yeah, he didn't break any laws.
He's just taking advantage of the fucked tax laws.
And when people say loophole, it's like, no, it's not a loophole. It's the law that is just being followed. A loophole
is the law maybe perhaps morally not right? That's a different debate.
That's
but in terms of
conversation.
Yeah. In terms of what the law is, that's exactly.
But then the morally right part gets subjective, but because we all technically have access to the tax code.
Mm-hmm.
Every single one of us. It's just what profession do we choose to go into a certain tax part? Are we W-2 where we write off fucking nothing virtually? Or are we W-9? Are we setting up S corps, for certain things? Like, what are we doing?
It's like the information's out there and we could utilize it,
But now, for purposes of this conversation, I think the tax code should be completely just lit on fire.
Right.
And start a small niche over. And by small niche, make it plain and simple. Like the Constitution. The Constitution said that you paid corporate taxes. And corporations spend millions to pay zero. They pay millions to pay zero. But the Constitution does say you pay a corporate tax straight up. And we don't do that no more.
And it just reallocating, that's what I think we talked about last time, is just reforming it first before you talk about cutting them or adding them.
Yeah.
Shouldn't they first be talking about taking the existing? Because the practicality of the current system is that 80% of IRS revenue will come from small businesses earning under $200K. So those corporations are awesome at not paying the tax. They spend millions to not actually get into the actual tax revenue. So I would just rather have them pay, even reform like that and not actually pay any more than they currently are. So, they don't need to pay more than they currently are. Just what they're doing with it right now is not helpful.
Yeah. How about Amazon, instead of paying out almost $100 million
to avoid it,
lawyers and accountants to avoid it, just to not pay billions, just pay that $100 million in fucking taxes. So you're not paying zero.
Yeah.
Yeah, because if it actually ended up in schools and roads and that pie chart instead, that would be great, instead of to the lawyers and the list of the people are saying just a minute ago.
Yeah. But the fight that they want to do is, how do we get everyday Americans? Where should we give tax breaks? Where should we increase taxes on the W-2 workers? And they say we're going to give big corporations tax breaks, but there's so much in the tax code that is pro-business and not pro-worker.
Right.
Technically, like we talked about again last podcast, when you had Henry Ford around, there was no such thing as an income tax. And the income tax, 100%, Alex, verify this if I'm wrong, 100% of our income taxes goes to pay the interest to the Federal Reserve. So it doesn't go to schools or roads like people assume.
I've heard that.
It goes to pay the fucking interest.
I've heard that before.
to the Fed. So yeah, our system is I still think we're the greatest country ever, greatest country currently. Undefeated, back-to-back World War champs. All those things you want to say about America. I wouldn't want to live in any other place. But for my children, your children, and our grandchildren, I want to fucking fix it. I want to change it. Get it back to the foundation.
That's
the founding fathers.
For sure, that's always been my approach, and that's often the difference between perhaps like modern, like far left liberals and stuff is the way I look at it is if you truly love something like America, then you need to be able to criticize it, and you can't just say we're number one all the time and just cheer number one all the time. It needs to be, you got to be able to call out something if you really want it to be great. And
because you want to fix it, right?
Yeah, I want to fix it. I don't just want to hate on it and then move to Ireland. I will go to Ireland if nothing is improved, but I don't want to. I would love to stay here and build this up.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the other people who say America's so terrible. Nick just got back from the Philippines, and he himself said, "I think the greatest thing for these people would actually spend some time there." And then truly, if you say America is really, really terrible and it's actually fundamentally evil, you should really, really try to get out of your safe suburban home and everything. And before you say that, please go to those. And for me, I read so much history and so much world history. I read about Sudan, stuff like that. And you start to realize, damn, it can get so much crazier than it is despite the hardships here and how wrong we are doing things. I still love this country. I want it to improve, and I'm going to call it out because I love it. I'm just not going to say we're number one all the time. So I'm not like super like those guys, but I'm also not like leftists who genuinely hate the country. That's insane. Right. They're in bubbles too, and they need to go to Philippines and stuff because it's crazy over there. He was telling me about the Pag. Have you guys heard that?
No.
Mm-mm. Pag is literally where they take food that's been put in dumpsters and recook it and then feed it. Because there's not enough food.
Yeah, that sucks.
So it's total chaos, lawless disorder. And I think also with the modern approach to these things is we need to separate any type of talk of race and culture. We need to be able to criticize cultures and not be called out as racist, both towards European and past their behaviors, as well as towards current countries and their failings. If I criticize the Philippines, I'm not being racist because the Philippines are a wide range of all different types of ethnic groups. But if their cultures are failing them as a people, we need to do that for ourselves as well. When you say American culture, does that mean it's a racist thing? There's a wide range of American colors and things. That would be a really silly thing to do. So the same applies to nearly every country on the planet. We need to be able to call them out without some kind of immediate game stopper that you're racist. Because if you can't call these out,
I agree. Yeah. It's the same thing like we were talking about earlier. Where it's in the name of love, where you're trying to help them.
Exactly.
Everyone. The tide rises all, or whatever that saying is. It's like
absolutely
we're trying to help everyone on this planet, and that comes with some tough love sometimes.
I want Latin American countries to do better. Because I actually want them to. I went to Mexico and I saw how beautiful it is in Mendocino and Ensenada. And I was like, why is this not like the 5th largest economy in the world? Because it has every other number going for it. Has all the other things, demographics. They have oil. They literally have oil coming right out of the ground. They could use that as revenue to pay for other programs. The amount of things in Mexico's favor. You got the world's largest trading partner right to your north. So China has to ship all this shit all the way across the biggest ocean on the planet. And Mexico right next door has much better trade links than China. We could be doing far more trade with Mexico than we do if this different situations would change. Am I saying this about Mexico because I don't like it and because I don't like Mexicans and because I want to talk down on Mexicans? No, it's because I genuinely want our ally and our neighbor to be stronger. I genuinely want that. I don't want them to be in a situation where they have to feel like they need to come here or they need to leave their own country to be prosperous. It's
help us also in this.
It's going to be a hot take, and most people will not accept that. But that's where as a moderate, that's where I have to kind of hold the line and say it's not racist for me to call these things out. If I spend a lot of time learning about Mexico, then I'm not going to say it's racist for me to call things out that I found out about Mexico. And especially because I'm not trying to do it like there, and that's where obviously I disagree with Trump, where he made that statement of a blanket statement about them. They're not all rapists and etc. Right? And I think we all knew that, and I think that was just one of those where he was over generalizing. Right? Are some of them? Yeah. Are some Americans? Yeah. Are some Europeans? Yeah. Everybody in the world has some, but not all of them, and not all of them are whatever, but these are those things. Latin American policies need to be criticized for them to get better, but it's not in a thing of taking them down. It's in a thing of, man, if you could think of the potential. Brazil's economy's potential, huge. Mexico's huge. Central America, they have some of the regions, like, isn't it Guatemala has literally majority native, so that could be literally regions that should be, by democracy standards, majority native ruled, and they're not. Those things are unacceptable, and I'm going to call those out. And it's not racist for me to call those out. I'm just honestly, people might mistake my intentions and may mistake all of our intentions, but people know me.
I agree. I totally agree.
No, and call out Europeans, call out Americans. It's not just one way. Call out if Europeans are doing dumb shit. They happen to be a lot of white skin, but if they're doing dumb shit, call it out. It has nothing to do with race. We got to separate that. To have meaningful conversations about this, we have to have their culture is different than your color of your skin. They're not the same.
And we can't tie it to our
can
ego.
Be criticized. They should be.
It shouldn't be tied to your ego in that sense either, where you have to.
And in defense of Trump, when he made that statement about the rapist, I don't know if Google Bard will give you an appropriate transcript of what he technically said.
It's so politicized.
But what he did say was in reference of coyotes, because like 90% of women who cross the border with coyotes are raped.
Have to pay a fee, and that fee is not right. That's a fucked up fee.
For the context.
Gotcha.
Yeah, which it was blown way out of proportion, and media saying
it got so politicized that pretty soon he's literally talking down to the whole country of Mexico, and it's like, how the hell did that happen? It's like, dude. And I always thought, I didn't actually hear the speech, and I only saw clickbait after clickbait after clickbait about it, so I never knew what actually. And literally, Bart says an AI powered overview is not available for this search.
Wow.
How would I word that? His
so
speech
I usually ask it. I usually go, "Can you transcribe? Is there a transcript of on YouTube or can you transcribe videos from YouTube?" And it usually says yes. And then I say, "Okay, can you find the YouTube video where Donald Trump gave a speech of X?" And it says yes. It's like, "Can you transcribe that for me?" And then it usually will send it to you.
Wow.
But I mean, even the All In podcast has done those for their own videos, and it'll get it wrong. It'll say that David Sachs said what actually Jason said. So they did a bunch of examples on their podcast one day, and it still wasn't accurate.
So even then, the generated content is like someone's politicized summary of it. It's not
kind of, yeah.
Or it can be. It can be. Gotcha.
Yeah, it can be. There are definitely times where I feel like it's like, okay, it transcribed this pretty well and gave me the information I was looking for. But yeah, I think this was a freaking awesome third pod. We just got to.
It was the fiery one.
I feel like I missed a little bit of the fire. I felt like I got there when it was getting stoked.
It turned into one. But like you said, you guys, you're right. It went off into a direction not planned. So that's my bad.
But that's all right. We got to just kind of like make lemonade sometimes.
Absolutely. I did my best to do that anyways.
And I think some of the best podcasts are when it just flows naturally into something.
Right. I agree. Yeah, that's what I was saying earlier is like, even if like what do you think about the editing and breaking these up? Like, say we just go on chats for a long period of time. Is it possible to cut those into separate pods, or do we have to have, you know what I mean?
No. So what my idea was, we're gonna have the whole 2 hour 18-minute one,
Uh-huh.
and then you can make sub shorts that are still like 12 minutes, 13 minutes, 15 minutes,
Gotcha. Okay.
8 minutes, because then they can get the whole thing of what we're saying. And then also for social media, we'll do like ones that are only like a minute, 30 seconds. And that's where you can even cut out, you can take a 5-minute conversation and make it a minute and a half, because you're kind of just cutting out the junk. Maybe we repeated ourselves,
Right, stuff like
or
that.
maybe there was some information that wasn't as valuable. And then you post that one, and then it just leads them to the overall podcast, or on YouTube,
Right.
they're only watching a feature that's like 20 minutes because it's specifically only about X.
Sometimes I watch those where it's like a bigger podcast, and they just took out that part about Linus Tech Tips, and then the rest of the time they're talking about other stuff, that kind of thing.
And it might even be worth paying for this, because I've thought before we were ever doing this, I thought of getting this AI program that it chops it all up for you and just produces you. You can upload your whole thing. The free version.
How it does it? Yeah, how does it do that? I wonder.
It's AI, bro.
Fucking magic.
The free version.
Into the magic machine thing, and bloop,
it's called Video, VIDYO.ai. It only gives you 75 minutes a month for free, but it only lets you download. It can only be like 4 gigs. Then it's like, okay, even if I have a 60-minute video, it's going to be way more than 4 gigs.
Way more. It's almost like saying, that's nonsense, right? Because like you couldn't fit 74 minutes of anything in 4 gigs, right? Is it 4 megabytes or 4 gigs?
It's 4 gigs.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, maybe you could probably.
But still, like format, to get like the high quality format stuff, I've had to had it come down to like 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. I think is the most I've done, and it goes on there in like less than 4 gigs. But I might do the paid one just so it's so easy to just edit it all and put it on there. So shout out to video.ai if you guys want to sponsor us, because we're telling people about your product.
An hour of 4K video uses about 45 gigs of storage space. That translates to about 2 gigabytes per minute. So at a 4 gig max, you got 2 minutes.
You see what I'm saying?
For sure. There's these things on Steam. I don't know if you're that PC. It's like where everyone plays and buys their PC games. It's like the largest market. So it's like the equivalent of the App Store or iTunes Store, right? And so what they do is they do periodic polls on people's hardware. So they'll ask you to submit what your hardware is, so you can see and basically you can just get an idea of like what GPUs is the majority of people using, and what the majority of screens people are using, and stuff like that. And so gamers are probably the most adaptable to technology, so they have it. And the recent Steam study, what did I say it was? It was like 3.4% of people actually have 4K screens. So, and 75% use 1080p or 1440. And it's kind of technical, but I guess my point is that it'd be cool to have 4K video, but the vast majority of people do not have 4K. So it would be a huge waste of resources if you have to pay a bunch to do 4K video that only a tiny portion of the population can actually watch it. So,
well, I gotta run, guys. So
for sure,
I say we close out this one. Thank everyone for listening or watching episode 3. I'm Jesse Carstairs. We have the man Tyler / Howard Flanagan, and then we got the big brain Alex Flanagan. It's hard for me to call him Ty. When I was like sending the thing for our logo, I was like, Howard, wait, Ty, maybe Howard? Tyler. I don't know.
That's all right.
I'll just put Tyler.
Thanks for watching.
Yeah.
Peace.
and then